Hey everybody, vandweller, deucescrack.com, back with part 2 of my January hand history review. Thank you all for kind comments in the forum, and enough of you guys wanted to see a part 2 that I decided to do it. And frankly, I have a time slot to fill, so what the hell else am I going to do? So we have 27 hands left. And I think that's enough for a video. If you guys like this format, I can do this every month if you want. Just take the hands that I played throughout the month, go through them in the replayer. So let me know if that's something you guys like. So why don't we just kick it off. And again, I haven't seen any of these hands, so I don't know what I'm looking at. If some of these hands end up being clunkers or not interesting, I'll just try to get through them as quickly as possible. And if they show me doing something really stupid, you're going to see it. So, nothing hidden. I mean, we all make mistakes, don't we? Alright, let's just plunge in. Oh, where'd it go? Here it is. Alright, is that lined up? That looks lined up. So, we've got pocket queens. Everybody loves pocket queens. Obviously, standard 3x raise, early position. We get basically 3.5x'd by, who is that? That is Shu 1219. He's a semi-regular, decent player, I guess. I think he's a winning player. And he 3.5x's us on the button. I can't really recall ever having any run-ins with him. But you never know how people are going to act. So there's that. So now we call, fold, or raise, right? I don't think we can fold. Queens are too strong. On the other hand, he's kind of showing strength here. But he's on the button, right? So that could be, a lot of things. And I can't, and it's hard to raise here. I mean, I suppose I could raise, but this is such a strong, it seems to be weighted towards particularly strong hands, so I don't think my, I don't think I have that huge an equity advantage that I could just shove all in and expect to be a favorite on the money that goes in over and above the 315, right? Obviously, I can call for a profit, right? But I don't think I can raise for a profit, so I decided just to call. It's kind of tough to be out of position, but and I guess that's an argument maybe for shoving, but I think it's a little bit better to just call and just sort of see what develops. So that flop comes out, and a pot of 675 and 1425 effective stack behind, I don't think I can really do anything except for go broke in this hand, if that's going to be how it goes. Now the problem is, well, not the problem, but the issue is, how do I decide to go broke, right? Do I decide to do it all on the flop? So if I mean, obviously I'm going to check to the razor, because then I let him bet his entire range against me, instead of betting out myself and letting him shove, which is going to be a narrower range, right? So by checking, I let him commit more of his chips and possibly himself to the entire hand with a larger, wider range. So I decide, do I check? Yeah, I let him bet. And now the question is, do I check raise or do I just call? And I think I want to keep his range wide. Now, of course, if I just call, I do risk letting ace or king come out, and of course, ace king is a big portion of that range. 16 combos of ace king versus 6 for any pocket pair that he might have. So ace king itself is going to be a pretty wide range, and I think he would play it like this. So I decide just to now, of course, yeah, again, I could shove and just kind of prevent ace and king from coming out on the turn or river. But then again, he might even have odds to call me if he had that, since he's committed so much of his stack. But I decided to call and just let him bet one more time. If he has, I don't want to blow him off his hand if he's got, kind of a lower pocket pair, and then I throw in a big check raise, and I'm representing I'm pretty much representing the range that I would have, where here I can sort of underrepresent a little bit. And so that comes out, and I don't think there's any question now with stacks of 915 behind. I don't really have much of a choice. So the question is, again, do I lead out, or do I check and let him bet again? Potentially, right? Because if he checks back, I can always try and bet the river, or even check the river, depending on the card that comes out. Now, there are more draws that are coming out here, but he's not 3-betting me pre-flop with, 5-6 necessary. I mean, I would be shocked if that happened. And even less so with hands that are 2 diamonds. But he could. But I decided to check, let him bet out the rest of his hands. Instead of, again, betting and then folding out all the hands that I beat, or a lot, well, I wouldn't fold out all the hands that I beat, but I would fold out a good number of the hands that I beat, I would think. Although most pocket pairs, I think, are going broke on this kind of flop. But I still think that I've underrepresented my hand a little bit. And by checking, I can let him bet, a lot of unimproved overcards. So that's how I decide I think I play that one. And I call, and that comes out. And we hate to see that card, but what does he flip? Does it matter? I mean, that's the thing. Should we even look at the results? I can't help it. He has ace-jack. So, I don't know. Given what he had, I think I played it the best I could. It's not clear to me he would have gotten all in pre-flop with it if I had, shoved on him. Or it's not clear to me that he would have gotten all in with me on the flop or the turn. Potentially the turn, though, because a lot of times in double-paired boards, guys will stack off with ace-high. But I'm not sure if this guy's, going to do that. But, given what he had, I think I played it the best I could. And, I got the most value, obviously, that I possibly could. So, I don't know. I think that one's alright. What's the next one here? Jack 7. Sort of in the wheelhouse of my favorite hands. I love hands with a jack in it. So let's see. Bust shoves. And I don't think there's any question that we're calling, right? We're getting 2.49 to 1. And we do call. So I'm not entirely sure why I saved that hand, because that's pretty obvious, right? Pot is 1252, and we have to call 502. And even though it's for a significant portion of our equity, we still have them covered and we'll still be in the tournament. So if you're not making calls like that, then you should. And I would call this virtually any two, because these busts on a wide range. And of course, it shows down King 8, but I win, because if you do the right thing in life, the lesson is you win, right? So I don't know why that was pretty trivial. I don't know why that was in there. Jack 10 suited on a bubble. We are the chip leader. We've got at least one opponent who's somewhat risk averse against us. Well, he's very risk averse against us. You get 25% of equity, right? So for him to get involved in a all-in pot, if you remember from my previous videos, if a guy has 25% equity in the bubble, now with equal stacks, right? But this isn't equal stacks, but it'll be approximate this. A guy, if he doubles up, he'll go from 25% equity to about 37% equity. So if you do the math out, he needs to be roughly 66% favored or so in order to get involved with us, or to get involved in an all-in pot. And so I'm sure, what is this going to be? And why did I save this hand? Oh, usually if I save a hand that looks fairly obvious, then it's because I'm wondering if I want to evaluate my opponent's play and to see if I think that their play was reasonable. I mean, obviously we're shoving Jack 10 suited all day, right? So the reason I must have saved this hand is he must have made a questionable call, and I just wanted to see if it was in fact good or bad. And he called with ace 6. So I don't know anything about this player. His stats don't look particularly good through 87 hands. 26-6 is a little bit too disparate a difference between his VPIP and his PFR. So probably somewhat fishy guy. And he sees an ace and he sees me shoving. Now, did he accidentally make a good call? I guess we can look at that. Let's see, ace 6. Let me see the action as it's coming to him. And I will load it up in the whiz. I mean, on the face of it, my initial reaction, obviously I saved the hand, so I think it probably was negative. I don't know how profoundly negative, because he's the 4th in chips, and we could be shoving. I don't think I'd be shoving any 2 here, because he is the short stack, and I don't like to shove any 2 against the short stack. I prefer to save my any 2s for guys in the middle, medium stacks like this, who have kind of a lot more at risk. So I wouldn't be shoving any 2, but I'd be shoving pretty wide. So let me set this up in the whiz. But my initial reaction is that it probably is bad, and that he probably needs something like ace 9 something like that. And probably pocket, oh, I don't know, let me think, pocket, I mean, sevens, eights, something like that. So here is the whiz, totally unadjusted. This is assuming, this is from his perspective, assuming I'm only shoving 16%, which is absurd. Now it's interesting to observe that ace-6 here is never a call, right? Always negative. So what did he need? Well, let's see, it depends on what I'm shoving. I would say, oh, I'm shoving something like that. So let's see how that comes out. Look at that. Basically, I was right in the ballpark. Pocket sevens, ace 10, ace 9 suited, king queen suited. If I'm shoving any two, what can he call with? Boink. Pocket sixes, ace 10, ace 8 suited, king queen, king 10 suited. So he can call, you know, fairly wide range if I'm literally shoving any two, but I'm just not in that situation. And that's something important to note, maybe when you're playing against somebody, is do they shove any two against the very shortest stack? Or do they have a different shoving range against medium stacks as they do versus, you know, a short stack? Because I think in general you should shove wider on medium stacks than short stacks. So I'm not literally shoving any two, but so bad call by him, and then you just make a note. Calls too light. Doesn't understand his equity. I mean, that's the thing. Like, you can see this and know that he's almost always a losing player. He just probably doesn't, you know, he hasn't put in the work to understand how his equity works. So therefore, he's probably not, he's break even at best. So let's see, another hand. What do we got? What was that? That was Jack 10 suited. So here's ace, Jack offsuit. Oh, let's see. I raise. This guy calls. This guy's kind of risk averse against me. If you notice the stack setup, you know, I've got a little under half the chips. This guy is a little over a quarter of the chips, and everybody else is splitting the rest. Two, you know, micro stacks relative to our stacks, not for the blinds. I mean, they're still fairly, you know, quote, healthy in regards to the blinds. You know, almost 10 blinds. Same about here. So. But that doesn't change the fact, because we don't worry about blinds when we talk about risk aversion, right? We talk about equity, right? And this guy has a good portion of equity in the tournament. Even though it's not the bubble, it's very bubbly in here, right? So we raise kind of standard ace-jack, five-handed table from the cutoff. Easy peasy. This guy flats. That guy shoves. Now, so what do we do? Well, I think you know, it can't fold, because it's only 600 to us in a pot of 1565. I mean, we could potentially fold, but the betting has been reopened, and if we just call, this guy come over the top and give us a pretty tough decision for a good portion of our equity. So I think the best thing to do here is just to isolate. And it seems weird to, you know, 4-bet all in with ace-jack offsuit, but this guy is really, really risk averse against us, and we're kind of over-representing our range here. And so if we can fold him out, that's kind of a big coup, right? Because we got him to put in extra chips, subsidize the whole affair, right? So I think you don't really have any choice but to isolate him out. So, and that happens. I don't know if that was particularly interesting hands, but you know, I guess 4-betting all in with ace-jack is not something you do a lot of times toward the end. But we did, so. You know, it's just better. It's a better alternative than just calling. Some guys say, "Oh man, this guy." You know, a lot of times, guys, I see this when I'm coaching people, is they want to play check down, right? I don't like to play check down when there's dead money in the pot. You know, so if we can shove here and get this guy out of the pot, then we're just putting 665 in a pot that's 1565, right? So we could, if you know, if this came up, and we could pretty much call with any two cards. I mean, or shove with any, you know, if this guy were guaranteed to fold, we could call here with any two, because we're getting such a great price. Now, of course, we wouldn't end up having any two having raised from this position, but just theoretically, it's interesting in case, you know, if our table ninja accidentally raised for us, and this guy called, well, we should be able to get this guy to fold, I don't know, 98% of the time. So in that case, if you had accidentally misclicked and you had something like you know, 5-2, well, then you should probably shove all in here. So You know, you didn't need ace-jack to reshove on this guy, I guess is the point of this hand. Alright, whoops, wait. They all changed order. Uh-oh. There we go. Ace-3. Again, some of these are going to be varying in their level of interest just because I haven't looked at them yet. So, and they might also exemplify things we already talked about, but it's good to see things from different angles, right? So this guy makes it 525, and I think there's no question of what's going to happen here. He's risk-averse against us. He could be on a wide range. Now, the thing that you worry about is this guy doesn't understand his equity if he's so aggressive, because there are good aggressive and there's bad aggressive, and I think most of the aggressive players with stats like these end up being bad, but we'll see. So, I mean, we don't even need a hand as strong as ace-3 to do this. He's very risk-averse. There are 2 short stacks. He's got over a quarter of his chips. You know, he's in second place by a solid margin, so there's almost nothing that he can call with, and he could have a wide range, right? Now, if he were very tight, and he were only raising like 5 to 6% here, then you'd probably opt to not do this. But I mean, look at his. I mean, if I explain the stats, VPIP, PFR, that's a number of hands. This is raise first in from the small blind. This is raise first in from the button, and this is fold big blind to steal. And then there's the first 2 stats here are about 3-betting, and this is how often he makes a 3-bet, how often he folds to a 3-bet. And the 3-bet stats don't really mean much through 26 hands. I even hesitate putting them in there when I did, because I just put them in there like last week, because they take such a long time to converge. But I figure against the regulars over whom I have 1,000 hands, that it might give me something meaningful. But you can't really. I mean, look, fold to 3-bet 1. So I mean, what is that? That's not really significant information. So that doesn't really figure into it. So that's make a 3-bet, fold to a 3-bet, and then this stat would be what is that? Oh, make a C-bet and then fold to a C-bet. So, so there's no question that's going to happen. We have the ace as a blocker, which kind of helps. That means he has less aces in his range to dominate us. Of course, if he has one, that's going to suck. But he can't even. You know, he's not allowed to call with one. He might, but he's not even allowed to call with an unpaired hand here. So, and he folds, and we take a pot. So if you're not doing stuff like that, I mean, I know a lot of there's a lot of guff given about own the bubble, own the bubble. That does not just mean open shoving. That means finding risk aversion and using it against people, right? It isn't just, well, just shove on medium stacks. There are other ways to own the bubble, right? And if you're not doing stuff like that, then you're not getting the maximum value out of your chip stack. So do it, but not against me. Ace 5. Now this looks like another setup where one of these is going to happen, right? This guy min raises. He doesn't have particularly aggressive stats. I mean, these are a little bit on the weak side, but they're not uber tight either. So he could be a little rangy. This blue number is raised first in from the button, so he could 29% of the time. And these are filtered for, I think, 5 and 4-handed or 4-handed and 3-handed or something like that. So that's still fairly rangy. And again, we have the ace as a blocker. He's risk averse against us. He might not know it, but anytime we can put a guy into a decision, that's going to be tough for him. I mean, he could obviously make a bad one and hurt us, but I still like having a guy like that in our game who can make a bad call, even if it's against us. So we do that. And unfortunately he calls. And let's see, do we think it was a good call? Pocket eights. Well, that's a good question. It's really hard to put us on doing that, right? Most players will not put us on doing what we did with as weak a range as we had. So, then again, I might have done this at the table already. I mean, that's always a possibility. So do we like his call? I have to say I don't think I do. I think this is one of those jacks plus situations. Now, the problem in trying to figure out from his perspective if this was a good call is that you can't really do this immediately with sit and go wizard, right? If you try to, you can't make yourself you can't make yourself a guy who only makes a raise pre-flop you know, a non-all-in raise and then has to call a 3-bet or a 3-shove, whatever you want to call it. You can't make yourself that guy. Like, I'll set it up, and there's just no way to do that. Like, if we do this, well, I'll pause the video before I do this. So here's the stack setup in Wizard. Oops, I forgot to change the blinds. I think it was 100, 200. Was it? It was. So there's the setup in Wiz, right? And try as we might, we can't actually give ourselves having raised, right? We can maybe make us, and then make him raise to whatever he raised to 400, right? Now, of course, it's saying this is, you know, I totally ignore that. But we can't then make ourselves him having only raised, right? It makes us automatically push. So how do you analyze from this guy's perspective what he should do when he shoved on? Well, what you can do is you can project what the stacks will look like if you fold and what they'll look like if you call, and then you can set up the whole risk-reward thing, right? So if we project what the stacks will look like if he folds, well, what will the stacks look like if he folds, right? Let's see. If he folds, oops. If he folds, it'll still be 100, 200 presumably. I'll set it up over here in Sit and Go Wizard. He'll be under the gun with 3450, right? So we give 3450. And then Vandweller will have 5420 on the button, and let's see, this guy will have still his 1755 in the small blind, and this other guy will have his 2875. So you just set it up just like that, right? Just what will the hand look like next? Then you choose that. Oh, I gotta pick some whole cards, and we want to be him, right? So we have to pick whole cards as him. We'll just give ourselves that. And so then the wizard comes up with this, but we gotta make the blinds right. So if he folds, he'll have 2686, right? So we're gonna use our calculator eventually. So he'll have 2686, right? So that's what he's risking. So now we have to figure, well, what's the reward, right? Now the reward, we can actually project again, what will the stacks look like if he wins, right? Well, if he wins, what will have happened? Oops. Well, he did win, so that's not actually hard to figure out, is it? So we can actually go like that. But if he hadn't won, and you know, if we didn't know, then all we have to do is sort of double his stack and add any dead money, right? So we just double his stack to, all right, let's change this. Oops. He'll still be under the gun, right? And we're the hero in this case. We're pretending we're him. So we just got to double his stack. Let me make sure this is set right. All right. Hello. Sorry. So we double his stack, and let's see, what will his stack be? 3850 times 2 is 79. Oops. 79. These other two stacks will stay the same, right? So then what you can just do is move this down enough. I mean, of course we could subtract, right? But that's too hard. No, what will we have? We'll actually have 12, somewhere in the 12 range, so we'll just give ourselves that and then adjust it so that this says 13. So we need to $13.50, 30, so we want to subtract 30 from this, so we'll have $9.70 left. Does that make sense? Yeah, I guess that makes sense. So we'll have $9.70 left. So now we look at his equity again, and it'll be 40, right? So, I mean, basically we're doing what Sit and Go Wizard does, but won't allow us to do, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to look it up in PokerStove and then just see, you know, based on our range and what he has and what he can call with. So what did we have before? 26 something and change. I think it was 2630 something. We'll just say 2630. It's close enough. I forget exactly what it was. I should have written it down. Well, sorry, I just paused the video. I wasn't happy with the imprecision, and I wanted to get exactly what he had. So I reset up the hand. 2686. And wouldn't that suck if I forgot the other one? No, but I didn't. I wrote it down. So 2686, right? So basically this is risk divided by risk plus reward, right? We can see how often, so what he's risking is what? What he's risking is 2686, and his risk plus his reward, well, that actually ends up being what he'll have, if he doubles up, right? Because he's risking 2686, and his reward is the difference between what he'll have if he wins and what he'll have if he folds. His reward is that. So obviously his risk is this, and if this is the difference, then those two numbers actually just add up to what he'll have, right? So you can just do 2686 divided by 40.15. So divided by 40.15, and he needs to be a 66.8, basically a 67% favorite to win, right? So now if we give ourselves, we go into Poker Stove, we can give him pocket eights. And now I would do this with virtually any two cards, right? So let's just see on the one hand, I mean, I might fold out some junk, but let's just see, just on a very basic level, if I were to be doing this with any two cards, could he call? And the answer is yes, he could, right? If I were literally doing this with any two cards, and he needs, from an equity perspective, to be 67% of the time. But is there any way that he could know that I was doing this with any two cards? Like, what range would he really put me on? If he thinks, well, I have ace king a lot of the time, and overcards and stuff like that, well, he's going to be in for a sore surprise, right? And obviously he's way down like that. Now, it's possible he might think that, well, he wouldn't just shove with aces, but I would. I wouldn't just shove with kings and queens, although I actually would. So what if he wants to take certain hands out of my range, right? What if he wants to take those top hands out like that I might play another way, like maybe making a smaller raise or just flatting or something like that? Then he's still not there, right? So what if I'm sort of, about how narrow would I have to be reshoving for him to fold? Or how, yeah, that's the question. So if I'm shoving 60%, he has to fold. Just how wide can I be shoving where he's still 76%? Alright, so, whoops. Oh, let's forget to enumerate all and do Monte Carlo. It's slower. I mean, it's faster. So it's coming out to be around 65.5. So even if I'm shoving, 70 whatever percent I was doing. Whoops. What did I say I was doing? 76%. He still can't call. 80%. It's approaching it. So, I mean, so this is how you analyze a hand when you don't have sit and go wizard, right? You don't need sit and go wizard to figure out the equity for you. You can use my spreadsheet like that we made in the Blackboard video. What is it? ICM from scratch, right? You can use that, come up with a pretty good answer. So you don't necessarily, you have to just say, well, sit and go wizard can't analyze it, therefore we're done, right? We can't think about it. No, you can still think about it, but you just have to do a lot of the legwork yourself. And frankly, when I was learning sit and goes, we didn't have sit and go wizard. We have sit and go power tools, which I didn't like at the time because I thought there were some problems with how it calculated the equity, and it couldn't do overcalls, and there were just other issues with it, and the ranges were kind of dumb. So that's why I made my spreadsheet, and that's how I learned sit and goes is through Poker Stove and my spreadsheet, not through sit and go wizard. So it looks like if we're put on any unreasonable, if he can put us on any reasonable range of cards, and he has a pretty bad call with pocket eights. But on the other hand, I might actually do this. But there's no reason this guy has this read. I haven't really played enough for him. So I think that was a bad call in general. But again, that's how to analyze your own hands without really needing sit and go wizard to do all the grunt work for you. I mean, you have to do the grunt work, right? It's harder, but I think you learn more. So anyway, I think a bad call by him. Let's go on to another hand here. That was ace-5. So pocket kings. So already, I mean, we can sort of tell what this is going to be, right? This is me trying to maximize value with kings, right? So that happens. So again, super dry board. How do we maximize value? Well, I mean, obviously we're committed to the hand no matter what. Having a stack to pot ratio of about 3 to 1, or a little better than 3 to 1. All right, we have 3 times the stack. Our stack is 3 times the pot, so it's a good stack to pot ratio for playing over cards and top pair, good kickers and stuff like that. So this guy bets out, and again, like in previous hands, I decide to flat. I don't think I'm in a lot of danger of missing value for my hand, and I just think that it's hard for him to have hit this. Again, if I raise, I think I'm folding out a lot of bluff hands. Although I will possibly stack hands like pocket nines and maybe a guy with a 4. But I think his donking range is going to be wider than the range that he will, call raises with here. So, and I think his donking range on the turn is wider than the hands that I can get all in with or get a significant amount of money in on the flop. So I decided to wait a little bit and let a card like that come out, which is a great card now for us because it gives him top pair possibilities. It puts some draws on the board, so now we can get value. He bets like that, and I got to decide, should I shove here or should I call? I think you could do either one. I mean, you're committed to the hand no matter what. I think a better line might be to just go ahead and shove here since there is now the ability to get value. On the other hand, it's still not a super wet board, is it? So you could do either one. I have to just call because by calling I create a pot of 1260 and I have 835 behind, which should be a fairly good amount to be able to get in on the river if he hits anything. And also he's out of position, so he might continue his sort of donk thing there. So it gives us options. And a queen comes out, which is a good card for us because it gives us one more hand that he could have hit that we could beat, and there's no question, obviously. Well, he does that, and we do that, and he has pretty much nothing. So he very well might have put in more chips on the flop of the 4. A lot of guys will do that. They can't fathom that someone who's raising pre-flop would have an overpair, but sometimes they do. So a lot of times a guy will stack off like that. But I think overall we probably get the most value for our hand. Again, by just waiting and not making bets that can't make money, right? Or super... a guy would have to have a very specific range in order to make money, right? And it just so happened that he might have had that range, but overall he might not have. So I think I think that's a good way to play the hand. When you're not in danger of missing value for your hand, then I think you can play it slow. When it's wrong to slow play is when you have a hand that you'll eventually want to get all in with, but there's no way that you can if you slow play because the bets are too small relative to the pot size, and then you end up with having 3 times the pot on the river, and there's just no way for you to get all in. That's a time when slow playing is wrong. But when there's no danger of that, I think slow playing is totally fine. Even a 1-pair hand can be slow played. So not that I'm this big advocate of the slow play, but in certain circumstances you can maximize your value with it. So let's go on to another hand. What do we got? That was king. So here's 5-3. What is that? We're in the small blind here. Oh, okay. So folds around to us, and there's no question that we can shove here. We are way behind in the tournament, right? I mean, we have. I mean, just from a equity perspective, we have the lowest stack in the tournament. We're way behind everybody else, pretty much. I mean, there's a couple guys were near, but a couple guys with 3,000 stacks, or 3 guys with 3,000 stacks. Guy was original stack. So we don't have a lot of equity in the tournament, and as I go over in the Flying Blinds video, when you don't have a lot of equity in the tournament, you're not risking much, right? If you don't have anything, it doesn't hurt you when you lose it, right? That's different from what some people think when their tournament life is on the line, so-called tournament life. Well, the math doesn't know that you have a tournament life. All the math knows is risk and reward, right? It doesn't know, if 2 moves are mathematically identical, except one of them is for your tournament life, one of them isn't, well, then they're mathematically identical, right? Tournament life has no value, really. At least in a case like this, right? All there is risk and reward. And that includes even on the bubble. If someone shoves on you in the bubble, you don't decide, well, it's for my tournament life, right? You say, no, what's the risk and reward equity-wise, right? And the fact that it's for your tournament life is just, that's your emotions, right? That's just, well, I'm really upset that I busted out. But if you made a mathematically identical move that didn't bust you out, but you happen to lose, you wouldn't feel as bad. But it's the same thing. You lost the same amount of equity, so why get upset? Anyway, that's a tangent. Sorry, but so anyway, yeah, this is all just to say that when you don't have a lot, it doesn't hurt you to lose it, and therefore you're more justified in risking it. So we probably don't have any fold equity though, right? He's probably calling us 100% of the time, but it would still be a good move to make, just because what our stack would look like if we won, right? If we won, our stack would be what? Well, right now it's 55.50. It's 555. But if we happen to have won, our stack would be 705 times 2, so 1410, right? So it's got to be plus EV. I'm not even going to check that in Wizard, because if you don't see that, then you probably want to go play another game, but like dominoes. So given that we're able to shove, and that's profitable, is there a way that we can make more profit? Well, we always know that in that sort of balance, the equation of shoving on somebody, there's a fold side, and there's a side that happens, that occurs when he calls, right? When he folds, we win the pot uncontested, and we add that amount of, the equity represented by the blinds to our stack. And when he calls, we get into a gambling situation that we either win or lose, and kind of, and then the corresponding amount of equity for each of those comes or goes our way. So anything you can do to bump up the fold side of the equation is going to be very, very good for the math of that. And I'm not going to go into the specifics now. Maybe I will in a future video. But bumping up that fold side is good. So anytime you can get yourself some fold equity through some weird fancy machination, that's all to the good. So that's when we talked about this play, the stop and go, in Hey Van episode 2, I think. Or maybe it was 1. I don't remember. I think it was 2. And the stop and go, I mean, the reason I saved this hand is because I thought it was like the perfect example of a stop and go, right? It's like exactly, and it worked great, if I remember correctly. The idea behind the stop and go is, instead of shoving and getting called a guaranteed 100% of the time, you limp in pre-flop, right? But you have to do it with a very specific range of stacks, right? You want to limp in, you want to have an opportunity to limp in such that when the flop comes out, the pot on the flop, well, you have, roughly a half to 2/3, or a half to a full pot size bet left, so that you can have good fold equity on a flop. And also you're going to be first to act, so you get the first chance to, bluff him out. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the stop and go, that's kind of how it works. For those of you who are familiar with it, I apologize for the long, drawn-out explanation. But so to me, this was a perfect example of stop and go. By limping in here, we create a pot of 600, and we have almost exactly 2/3 the pot left in order to bet on any flop. So he obliges and checks behind, and the driest board in the world comes out, which he can't have possibly hit, really. And we do that, and he folds. So to me, that is, it's far superior to shoving, because you just don't. It's positive EV to shove, even though we know he's calling, because of what our stack would look like when we win. But here we added. And if he had something, he would have called the flop anyway. So a lot of the times that all in would have happened anyway, except that now we were able to get a little fold equity to bump up that fold side. So that's stop and go, and I think I saved this because it would be a good stop and go example for the book that I'm writing, and this other video series I have. So there's that. If you don't know the stop and go, there it is. And the range of stack size you want to have. If you look at how this hand started, we had roughly 2 blinds behind, so you want to have about 2.5 or so blinds. So any stack size that leaves, so like basically 1.5 to 2.5 blinds is a good range of stacks. Because if you had 1.5 blinds, right, you'd put in your half a blind here. The pot would be 2 blinds, and you'd have 1 behind, and that would give you a half pot size bet. Now you'd have a little bit less fold equity, but it would still be a reasonable move if you had to shove anyway. And then 2.5 would give you, you'd put in a half a blind, and you'd have 2 behind in a 2 blind pot, so you'd have a full pot size bet. And you could still do it a little deeper than 2.5 blinds deep, but that's ideal. So we've only it's 40 minutes. We've only gotten through like 10 hands. So King 9 suited. I'll try to go a little faster. King 9 suited. Here's a limper. Here's a limper. I decided to limp behind. It's the first level, or it's not even the first level. It's the second level. Blinds stacks are still 75 blinds deep. In position with suited King 9. I think is okay to limp behind. You could also raise here if you wanted. These guys have reasonable stats, so they're almost always going to have pocket pairs. This guy could have suited connectors now that he's kind of over limping, but this guy's almost always, if he's reasonable, going to have a pocket pair. So you're against ranges that are pretty easy to read, so you can actually raise pretty widely on the button for isolation, and then to, take it down on the flop because you're going to be against a predictable and/or wide range. Here this guy will have more predictable range. This guy will have a wider range. So both are fairly easy to play against because most flops are going to miss him because it's such a narrow and predictable range. We can sort of, play very easily against him. This guy has a wider range, so it's easier to play against him because he misses more flops. So, but limping behind is certainly good. Got a hand that can sort of make some weird straights and or a weird one straight. It can make the second nut flush and has a good top pair possibility. So you want to limp behind in really low blinds, that's fine. If you're on full tilt, I think that starts at 1530. It's less of a good idea because you're only 50 blinds deep. But here, UB is starts with a 510 and a 1020, and I think it's a little bit better. So I don't mind this. This guy leads out, and we're not going anywhere. I think a raise is a little frisky though. I decide to call. King 9, I hit my 2 pair. The question is, do I want to raise? If I call, the pot will be 240 times 2, 480, plus 270. It's going to be, what, 750? And he'll have 942 behind. And so that's a little bit more than a pot-sized bet, which is a little bit difficult to get all in on the river when you have more than a pot-sized bet. On the other hand, he is going to be out of position, so if he continues to fire away, now that I have 2 pair, my hand holds up very well against more of his range. If he does decide to fire away like half pot, he's going to be committed if he has anything, right? So I think even though by calling you're creating a pot that's less than the stacks, then I think it still can be a good idea because if he bets, then he's still committing himself. So you could still raise here. You could even make a min raise to 480 or 500, try to lure him in. And then you'll have pretty trivially easy all in on the river no matter what comes out. And so will he, actually. So I think either way is fine. I decided to just call because now, again, if he leads into us for even half the pot and I decide to raise, then he's going to be committed even if he doesn't know it. I mean, if he folds, then he's probably making a bad fold, and if he calls, then I'm ahead. So, but he does that, and obviously we have no choice but to do that. And nice turn for us. So again, creating the pot you want, and again, perfectly fine to limp behind here with certain suited robust hands after a couple limpers in the low blinds. So create your pot, and okay to limp. I guess those are the two. Maybe not super that interesting a hand, but there it was. As I said, I haven't pre-screened these, so I don't know what they're going to be. Pocket fives. All right, so we know from the setup already what this is going to turn out to be. Whoops, I got all these weird artifacts from Java or something. I don't know what it is. You have to sort of wipe them away. So, pocket fives. We already know what this is going to be given the stack setup. I'm imagining... Oh, there's no blinds. Can we put the blinds out, please? I feel like a deal. You ever go play live poker? All right, there's no small blind. We have this guy covered just barely. Here's a tiny stack. I mean, there's no question of what's going to happen. This guy's going to put in chips, and we're going to go like that. He's going to fold. Again, standard example. All these examples, I guess I keep showing them because to prove it's not a fluky thing that I do it once in a while. I do it whenever I can punish risk aversion. Now, it's probably less of a good idea given this guy's stats. 74-37, so he's pretty wild. But on the other end, even he has to recognize, even some of the worst players recognize how risk averse they are. And they don't want to bust out when there's a stack like this. So even against, I guess the lesson of this hand compared to other ones that are similar is that even against a guy with wild stats, you're still putting him in a terrible position. And in fact, it might even be a little better because when he calls, he's going to have that much worse of a range. So that helps you, even though it's negative, it's going to be less negative. So, alright. Pocket eights. Pocket eights. So this guy does that. There's no question that that's going to happen if you do that to me. Now, of course, if you playing the games that I'm playing, all of a sudden you know exactly what I do. So, boom. Gone, right? We didn't even have to have pocket eights to do that, right? And this guy's really short. We could have a wide range, and I think I've shown that I don't really need much to do that. Next hand. Unclearable. Same guy. it looks like one round later. This guy does that, and again, is there any question what I'm going to do? Boom. Even against the same guy, even though I did it before, it's just such a powerful move that against guys who are willing to fold, I'm going to do it all day. Next hand. Next hand, same guy. Looks like another round later. This guy's even shorter, so this guy's probably even more risk averse against us. He limps in, and it may look like a donkey kind of move, and there's a possibility that he's trapping here because we've already reshoved on him twice, but we have him in really bad shape here. So it might seem kind of donkey to shove 20 blinds on him. On the other hand, what can he call with? Boom, done. So, I guess this all goes to show just because you do it once doesn't mean you have to go into a hole. If a guy's willing to do it 1 or 2 times, he's probably willing to do it more. And that's just a classic example of a guy not adjusting. And this guy should, at least the third time, just know not to put any chips in against me in that kind of situation, but he'll just never get it. Is this another one? Yeah, same guy. So he does that, and even though it's 20 blinds, again, this guy is so short. What the hell can he do this with? What can he call me with if I do that? And some of these might show up as negative and sit and go wizard if you don't put the ranges in right. But again, 4 times in a row, this guy puts in chips and just leaves them there, and I'm just going to take them every time. So same game. And let's see, this is a red one. Is this the same guy? No, it's not. All right, good. Because what you don't want to see is me do that 4 times in a row to a guy and then see a red line next. Because then, oh, all right, see, that guy trapped you. But thank God I got away with it. Excuse me. What have we here? We have pocket 9s, and I don't see any blinds here. Presuming they took blinds. I usually do. Whoops. Didn't want to see that. So that guy shoves here, and the question is, should I call with 9s? This guy is very aggressive stats. 77% from the small blind, 46% from the button. Now you might say, well, doesn't that prove that there's no way he could be on any 2 or a super wide range, because if he's doing only 77% from the button, first in, if it's folded to him, and only 46%, did I say small blind, and then only 46% from the button, well, doesn't that mean he'll be even tighter from the cutoff? Well, these stats don't take into account whether he's the chip leader or not, and I have 292 hands. So some of these could be, maybe he has a guy who has him covered to his left, or maybe he had a very loose guy to his left, other times, and so he has to, kind of back off. Maybe he wasn't in kind of bubble owning position. So you can't necessarily say, well, he can't be ever wider than his button number from the cutoff, because that number is an amalgamation of a lot of different scenarios. So to me, this could be a very wide range. I mean, he's certainly very aggressive, these stats. So to me, he could be on a very wide range. Exactly how wide is not sure, but I would tend to think that he would have any number of robust-looking hands. And so the question is, do I call with the 9s? Well, you saw, I accidentally let it slip that I do call, but ought I to call? And first of all, I want to say that pocket 9s are probably the worst hand I would consider calling here, because we do have a lead on a guy. If we do have a fair amount of equity at risk, and I think probably this is going to end up being a bad call now that I look at it sort of in the light of day. Because again, if we double up, we'd be in first place, right? Just thinking about how we calculate our equity, doubling up would put us in first. We have a lead on a guy by almost, 2 to 1, maybe 1.8 to 1 or something. So we have a solid lead on somebody. Well, it's not 2 to 1. He's got 17. We've got 27. So it's maybe not that huge a lead, but it's certainly a substantial lead on a guy. We do rate to be the best player at the table and make the best decisions, so barring this decision, of course. So I think this is the worst hand that I would consider calling with, although I think in actual fact it's probably one of those jacks plus hands. If we set it up in the whiz, which I'll go and do. But I think that's what it's going to be. And I think, again, it depends on his range, but we'll see. We'll see if we can actually ever call, even if we were literally on any two. So let's see, is everything in the screen there? It looks like it. So if he's shoving that range, then we're only queens plus, but there's no way that he's only shoving that. To me, he's at least shoving like this. I mean, that's bare minimum. And so here it actually gets to be 10s plus, ace, king, ace, queen suited, so not as bad as I thought. Now, how wide does he have to be shoving for it to be positive? Well, 50% looks to be the break point, right? We saw this last time. This is our opponent's hand range. And then how our profitability of our particular hand that we have changes as he gets wider or narrower, right? So if he's shoving 50%, then we have basically a break-even call. So is it reasonable for him to have shoved 50%, right? And I think there's a lot more room for him to shove here. And he has very aggressive stats, which is probably why I made the call. So to me, I guess not so bad. I mean, if he's shoving any two, we can actually, call with down to pocket sevens. But it's not clear to me that he's on any two. Give him, I don't know, 60-something percent, and then we're right in the wheelhouse. So you want to be careful you don't adjust the guy's ranges here and sit and go wizard to make yourself correct. It's very easy to say, well, I call with pocket nines and I really want to be right. Therefore, he's shoving 68.6%. Now, no one would ever say that explicitly, but, kind of mentally, we can go through that process and go, kind of convince ourselves, yeah, 69%. When the actual fact might be closer to that. But I think there's a very good chance that, he's at least this wide, at least 50%. So I don't hate my call, given that. So there you go. I changed my mind about myself. Isn't that nice? So, all right, next, where are we at? We are getting there. I don't know if we'll finish. Let's see. These stupid artifacts just piss me off. These weird little... There we go. So we have a few hands left. Hopefully we'll get through them real quick. King 8 suited. We know what this is going to be, I think. Oh, wait. 49. Alright, so this has had to be a situation where... I mean, obviously King 8 suited is going to be a shove. Even though we're shoving, 12 blinds. That's perfectly reasonable. And we have a guy who's risk averse, and this guy doesn't necessarily have to call particularly widely yet as he has over 5 blinds or 6 blinds or whatever he has. So this must be where I try to figure out if I like that guy's call or not. And I obviously do not like that call as being the second assistant chip daddy. King Jack offsuit is almost... I can't imagine that ever being a call. Ever. Even if I'm on any... I mean... Well, maybe if I'm literally on any two, but I can't even imagine even then. Let's I'll set it up real quick and take a look, but that's a pretty bad call, I think. So if you're making calls like that routinely, then don't. So, assuming that we are on this range, which is the default Signal Wizard range, which is absurd, that's why, it's really dumb. He can't call with kings. Now, can he ever call? I mean, we can look at the chart there. We can already see it's all red, right? If it's all red, that means it's always negative. So he's always making a big mistake by calling King Jack here. Let's just see how big it is. So if we're on literally any two. Boink. Literally any two, he's losing about just under a third of a prize pool. Well, about a quarter of a prize pool. A quarter of his starting equity. He just gave up on that call, right? Crazy. And it's not even clear. I mean, I don't know if I'd be on any two here. Literally any two. I usually fold out bottoms when I'm, not sure. So, I mean, even if I fold out my very worst hands. I mean, now he's losing about a third of his initial buy-in. It's absurd. Terrible call. But, he doesn't understand the ahead but behind idea. That while he's certainly, quote, ahead of my range, he's not ahead of my range plus the equity ceiling and the equity context. So, bad call, sir. So let's see another hand. Ace 5. We're effectively on the bubble because this guy has like 100 chips and he's just never, gonna take a lot for him to come back. No small blind, but we still We shove, we get called. So for him to call, I think we can already see that, given the context, we are five-handed, so we aren't literally on the bubble, but it's pretty much there. He's he's in third place. He's got a huge lead on two other guys. So for him to call here has to be a pretty strong hand. I don't even want to see his hand. I just want to see what he needs in order to call. I mean, that's why I saved some of these hands, just because I want to know, what is the guy justified in calling with in a certain stack setup. And if the stack setup is interesting to me, like this one, then I'll just save it, even if it's not my hand, even if I don't, even if it's, a question of how I played it. So I'm going to set it up real quick. And I'm sorry if some of these hands seem repetitive or boring, but, you're just dropping in on me while I do the thing that I'm going to do otherwise. So I think that's good to sort of peek over someone's shoulder. So sit and go. I guess I took a look at the hand history because it occurred to me that this guy might... Whoops, where is he? Hello? Replayer. It occurred to me that this guy might actually be all in for his small blind. I said there was no small blind, but I think this guy's actually all in for it, and the hold manager can't really understand that. So I looked at the hand history, and it occurs to me that he says he bets 100, and this guy posts his big blind. So this guy's all in for his small blind, right? So let's see how the Wiz thinks of that. So if I'm shoving 18%, that guy can't. Well, I don't even know what he has. So let's. So when you don't know what a guy has, you can go use this, the range versus range. So so now let's see if he actually knew how widely I was shoving here. Probably shoving something like in there. I don't know, something like that. But then again, maybe not, because I do have to show down against that. So I might have restricted myself to fairly decent hands, because if I shove this, then all of a sudden the jig is up against, players who don't know me, right? Because I guaranteed have to show down. So I might, in that case, shove a little bit narrower range, knowing that my hand has to be flipped over. So I want to give myself something a little more robust looking. Something like that. Looks a little better. I mean, I can't imagine that I'd fold some of those, but just for the sake of argument. So if I'm shoving range versus range, opponent hand range versus hero hand range. Now you can see here, he's never allowed to call me wider than 6%, no matter how wide I'm shoving, right? 6%. So what does that look like? What is 6% of hands? Let's just pick somebody and just say what 6% of hands looks like. So he's going to have one of those hands in order for it to be a justifiable call. I don't see what he actually did have. So probably borderline, right? If we actually literally give him ace jack, it's probably in the borderline. No, that's assuming I didn't change this back. So let's give ourselves something more like what I have. Say 50%. And, well, it's not even that borderline. While ace jack would have been a call, or ace jack suited, ace jack is pretty well behind. So bad call by him. He lost about 1/6 of a prize pool, something like that, or 1/7 of a prize pool. Of his starting equity. It's all right. Bad call. I think those are good to know. So let's see. That was ace 5, pocket 10s. Let's try to go faster here. We're almost at an hour. So that happens, and the question is, do I call? It depends on what I put him on, and he doesn't have particularly aggressive stats, and I do that. I mean, effectively, this guy is going all in because I'm not sure if he's ever folding. So as this guy second in command, then again, I might have fold equity. I mean, then if a guy has the option to fold, some guys find the way to fold, right? Fold buttons in front of them. They sometimes can do it. It's not clear to me how much I have, so I'm just going to assume he shoved all in. And if he shoved what I call with 10s, I would be hard pressed to fold 10s in this spot. I think that's okay. I'm going to whiz it real quick. So against default range, which is never good. Against the default range, it's queens plus, but I mean, he's got to be shoving more than 15%. I mean, I can't imagine a guy's not. But again, he's not shoving, right? He's just making a smaller raise. So I mean, that kind of complicates things because the guys will make a smaller raise with their really premium hands. You know, that's what I think probably tanks this hand for me, and that's probably why it was so difficult. Is, you know, a guy will push widely. You know, push is not the same as making a smaller raise, right? Because those ranges are different. The hands a guy will push are totally, not totally different, but it's different than the guys will open raise, right? A guy will um, might push a range that looks like, you know, you might say, well, you can push pretty widely, right? So in that case, you see, well, tens, well, don't even qualify, actually. So probably bad call by me if I called. I mean, tens are at the very bottom if he's shoving really wide, and most randoms aren't shoving this wide. So, but then again, if he actually literally shoved, I would say, well, all right. If he's literally shoving, he's probably going to try to sell these hands a little better. The aces, kings, and queens. I can't really get rid of ace, king suited, so that kind of changes things. So let's just say he's going to try to sell his ace, king, come on, a little better by making a smaller raise with it. Well, tens don't become much better. So then, if you think, well, what hands might he just make a minimum raise with? Oh, not a minimum, but a standard raise with as opposed to shoving. Right, raise to 900. 900. A lot of guys will shove, you know, the hands that they don't want to call, but they'll raise the hands they do want to call. And when you kind of put those hands back in there, let me put all the hands that he would just raise with. He might raise with hands like this. You know, he might, I mean, he's not particularly aggressive either, given his stats. So I'm thinking this is pretty, if I called it, I don't know if I did. Oh yeah, wait, I did. Yeah, all right. Pretty bad call because he's probably only doing something like this. And is he ever folding? Maybe he'll fold a little bit. So kings plus. So pretty donkey move by the van. And I probably was just in a position where I just wasn't looking at his stats very carefully. Because he does seem to be tight. I don't know what he flipped. He flipped kings over, which makes a lot of sense given what he had. So just a little bit of hand reading would have gone a long way in this hand for me. You know, just realizing that he is in a position to shove. But a lot of times guys will try to sell their hands a little bit by making smaller raises. And if I kind of realized that and put like a half a second more thought into it, I might have been able to find a fold, which I think would have been smart against this particular opponent. So bad move, Van. Listen, I'm not perfect. I mean, physically speaking, I am, but here's another one where obviously my move is right, but I'm wondering about this guy's move. Pocket nines. Now, if we just think about my flying blinds, which video? Flying blinds video? Kind of calculating this guy's equity. He's probably got about 25% equity in the tournament, maybe a little more. And if he doubles up, he'll probably have about 37, 38%. So he probably needs to be around a 66% favorite to call from an equity, you know, just from his hand, you know, that's equity perspective. So if we bring out the poker stove, see, what would I be shoving here? I'd be shoving pretty wide, I think. So if we just give him, oops, give him his hand, which is nines, and we give me a range that's wide, like that, maybe I'd back off on some of the junky hands, but maybe I wouldn't. Is he 66%? Monte Carlo. So he's probably right in there. If I'm shoving literally any two, he's 72%. So he has to know this is probably a move that he makes because this guy's a good, solid winning player, very aggressive. You can see from his stats. He's a very aggressive winning regular. So he must know what I'm up to. But I wouldn't necessarily be shoving any two here, although I probably could just from a game theory perspective. I'm sure if I looked it up on hold'emresources.net and their kind of NAT calculator, I could probably shove any two because he has to be so risk averse. It's, you know, that he's just not going to come up with a hand often enough that qualifies. And all the times that he folds, I make the blinds, and only the very few times that he has a hand that qualifies, which is basically in this situation, however, literally any two, probably eights plus or maybe even sevens. So yeah, we'll just say 8s because that seems about right to me. 7s think they're going to be a little weak. So 7s plus all the hands that are going to qualify. There's no unpaired hand that's going to qualify. I don't think. Does Ace King suited qualify for even we'll say 67%? I don't think it is. All right, just right in there. So if you go Ace King suited and 8s plus, how big of a range is that, right? He only ends up having a hand worth calling 3.5% of the time. So 96.5% of the time I win the pot outright, right? So it's got to be an any two shove from a game theory perspective. So he did the right thing for sure. Try to get through some more of these real quick. Queen Jack. What is that going to be? I don't know why I kept that one. I think it's pretty clear fold. We've got a lead on a guy. Although bust could be on a very wide range. We're only gonna we will have 5 blinds if we fold. So we're not getting that good a price. 1.4 to 1, right? So we need to be 41% favorite in order to justify calling just from a chip perspective. And of course, there's ICM too, right? So the ICM is going to bump up what we need. We probably need to be like, it's the bubble, so maybe 47, 48% to win, something like that, maybe even more. And it's pretty clear that I don't think we're that. So I don't know why I saved that one. Not that interesting. Pocket queens. What do we got here? Pocket queens. This guy raises early position. It's hard to say what his stats mean through 40 hands. That guy who's tight, and again, these are filtered stats, 9% preflop raise through 917 hands. And he's only got a 5% 3-bet. But that's not many examples, but it's indicative of something, right? And he's in relatively early position, and he's reshoving over the top of an early position raiser. So this has to be a pretty strong range. Then this guy comes in. So I don't know. To me, queens are. I mean, this guy's a doubled stack. I have a doubled stack. Everybody else is normal. Seems to me like it's too much equity to risk against a range that I'm just not sure that I'm particularly well ahead of. I mean, I guess jacks can do this. Tens can do this. The other queens can do this. Kings, aces, ace, king. But I'm in a position now where I have probably doubled my equity to something like 21, 22% maybe, or close to maybe 21%. I've got a little more than double stack, so, and one guy's eliminated, so maybe it's 21, 22. And if I were to win this guy's stack, maybe I would end up with like 28 or 29% equity, but I'm risking, probably about 18 of it. So it seems like I'm risking. I mean, those are just rough ballpark numbers. If I ended up being wrong, then it's in the ballpark. So I'm risking like 18 to win 9. So I need to be like 66% to win. And against that range, well, maybe I am. But the other thing too is I'm in a 3-way pot. And this is kind of an overcall situation, right? The way I like to look at multiple all-ins, sort of briefly, because we're kind of running out of time, but briefly the way I look at overcall situations is I look at, am I a favorite for, because there's going to be 2 pots, right? There's going to be a main pot for which, I mean, I'm assuming this guy's going to call. So this guy's going to call, this guy's in, this guy's in. It's going to be a main pot that's going to be basically 600 times 3 plus that. So let's say 700 times, so 600, be about 2,000-ish, somewhere in there. So there's going to be a main pot, and there's going to be a side pot. And actually there would be another side pot too. But so the way I like to look at it is I like to say, am I a favorite for the main pot and the side pot? Now, the main pot, I think I'm a favorite for, right? I've got pocket queens in a 4-way situation. I clearly have above average pot equity. We're still far away from the bubble for kind of ICM to really be a huge factor, but it is. So for the main pot, at least for the main pot, it's not a huge factor because it's such a small pot. So I feel like I'm a favorite for the main pot. Now, am I a favorite for the small pot? Well, it's not as clear to me that I am, because this guy's hand range again can be so narrow. To me, it's jacks plus. I think tens would flat potentially, but then again, they might try to isolate him. So maybe you can throw tens in there, but I still think tens might still flat some part of the time. So to me, it's jacks plus and ace king. And are we a really big chip favorite for that? Um, apply. I mean, throw it in poker stove and give ourselves queens. So poker stove says we're a small chip favorite, but then of course there's ICM, and we have doubled stacks basically that we're risking. So it kind of doesn't occur to me that I'm a huge favorite for the side pot. Now then, but you can't just go there and say, well, I'm not a favorite for one of the pots, because potentially when you're overcalling, the side pot could be so small that the main pot dwarfs it in value, right? Like if the main pot is most of the money that's at stake, then the side pot is just kind of an interesting little side note, right? But if the side pot is really huge relative to the main pot, then that kind of swamps it. So you have to ask yourself, am I a significant favorite for the larger pot? And it doesn't even appear to me that I am, even though I'm a favorite for the side pot. So I decide to fold. And do we need to look at the results? All right. Well, I would have lost that. I definitely would have lost against him. So look at that. Good fold, Van. Folding queens pre, early levels. I like it. Ace king. Here's another. What is this? Oh, all right. So I got to make a fold. Should I fold? Well, a lot of times a guy like this will end up with, what, pocket aces, and he just wants to lure people in, or ace king, and he doesn't know how to play it, or queens or jacks. But against that range, I'm not particularly a favorite, am I? Ace king, aces, kings, queens, jacks, maybe tens, sometimes nines. But I am a chip dog to all those hands. And if he does it with ace queen, I guess I'm ahead of those. But if he's ace queen, this can't be anything more than break even. So I like it just to fold this way, particularly against a guy with stats like this. Now, if this had been the third time in a row that he'd done this, then I'm never folding ace king. But this, if I recall correctly, is the first time he'd done it. So I decided to fold. I think it's a fold. I probably need to be, what would I call with? You know, I don't think I'd fold tens or jacks. You know, somewhere in there. If it, on its first shove. Obviously I can call significantly looser if this had been a few times in a row, because there are guys like that. So we're getting there. I think I'll be able to fit them all in. Bus shoves there. Tricky call spot, I think, but he could be on a significantly wide range. He's a short stack. I'm not I'm not out of the tournament if I call and lose, although I'll be pretty well crippled. I'll have about 5 blinds left, but still I'll have some fold equity left in my stack. He could be on a wide range. I have to think this is a call against him. I mean, because I'm not particularly, I don't have the best equity in the tournament anyway, being in third place. So I got to think this is a call. Shows down ace-2, which is perfectly reasonable for him. And I don't even know if I want to whiz that. I think that's against Bus, who's a somewhat knowledgeable player who can be aggressive when it requires it. I think that's got to be a call. Ace-7. Again, I don't know what these are before. There's another Bus shove from the button. I have him covered, so I'm technically not out if I lose, although I'm pretty much out, morally speaking. I'll be pretty well dejected and have 100 chips all in the small blind, but I won't technically be out. So again, this could be a wide range. Pot odd-wise, I'm getting 1.84 to 1, so I only need to be a 35% favorite from a chip perspective, and I think he can be wide enough. And so maybe from an ICM perspective, I need to be like 38, 39, 40%, something like that. And I think ace high against this range is going to be pretty good. And he has pocket fours. So kind of showed up with the top of his range, but I win anyway. So I think that's still a good call. I'm not going to whiz that because I think that's pretty easy. Pocket eights. Oh, I remember. I tanked so hard on this hand. Maroney is a pretty solid winning player. He plays mostly 50s, but he'll sneak into the 20s once in a while. I don't remember if this was from the 20s or the 50s. This is really tough. Basically in a 3-way tie for, second, third, and fourth. He knows that, and he could be on a very wide range. Now, again, his raise first in from the small blind is 34, and his raise first in from the button is that. But again, I have a fair number of hands on him, and those stats don't take into account the fact that he's the chip leader all the time, right? I mean, these could be, He's a medium stack, he's small stack, he's this stack of that. You know, again, it encompasses a lot of different scenarios. So it's not necessarily reliable for this, you know, directly translatable to this. So I got to believe he's very wide. He knows what he's doing. He's got to have a fairly wide range. And the question is, this one I do want to look at Wizard because I really tanked on this one for a while. I don't use my time bank that often these days. So I'm going to pause this and take a look because I'm really interested to see what I can call with. But I think this might end up being, I would say if he's on like any 2 or maybe 85%, just my intuition is he's got to be probably like over 80% for this to be right. So this is probably a bad call because I don't know that he's on literally that wide a range. But so let me pause and take a look. So default ranges are such that it has him shoving 20%, which is way too narrow. I got to think he's shoving somewhere in here, in which case pocket 8s tend to be a pretty bad call. Can I ever call? Well, let's take a look at the charts. And it just looks like if he's shoving, if he's shoving like 92%, then I can call. I don't think he's shoving that wide. Even if I gave him, you know, make him fold out the worst of his range. It's not super negative. I mean, I don't like it. Take out the edge. I don't think it changes anything. So pocket 9s and ace king. So and that's about where my intuition lies. My intuition lies that pocket 9s would be like significantly better. And yeah, pocket 9s are basically break even against the kind of range that I think he has. You know, a little bit negative, but so bad call vandweller. I think I overestimated pocket 8 strength, and I think I probably in the moment overestimated how widely he can be shoving because of the stack setup. I probably could ask him because he seems to be friendly with me what he was actually shoving there, or what he would shove. I mean, obviously I called, so well, not obviously I called. You see now that I called. So a little bit too optimistic of a call by vandweller, and he ended up with king 6, which is certainly well within his range, and I don't think he even needs to be that narrow. So if he's shoving king 6 offsuit, obviously he's shoving worse hands than that, I would think. So bad call me. I don't want to end the call. I don't want to end the video on a bad call by me, so we just have 2 more hands. But I do end up losing these hands, so it kind of ends on a sour note. I shove that. I'm trying to think why I save this hand. Oh, what do you think of the king 9? Yeah, the king 9 overcall is pretty rotten. That's going to be a really bad call. He would actually be more justified in calling with the king 9 if he had me covered, because then even if we both get eliminated by the chip leader, he'll still come in third. So this is a situation where you think, well, I'm the short stack, I'm getting the best odds, I can call. But in this kind of weird bubble situation, you'd actually rather be in third place here and call off than in fourth place and call off because, again, when you both get eliminated by the chip leader, he comes in third. And obviously, if he wins the pot, you know, he wins the pot, which is good. So the only way, if you were in third place, that he would bust out is if I win the pot. Right? Or bust out in fourth place, I mean, is if I win the pot. If he had, you know, me covered. But he has me, but I have him covered. So this is a really raunchy call. And it's possible that he had, I think, you know, it's weird to remember hands that you played like 2 months ago or whatever, but I think this was like an insta call. So he might have had his auto-click call button on expecting one of these guys to shove, in which case it would have been an okay call. But when the overcall happened, then it becomes dreadful, right? And we can sort of see that by, well, let me set it up real quick. Second thought, we'll just skip it. I mean, I think it's a pretty obvious spot, so I don't know if we need to get into too much whiz. I mean, are you guys whizzed out a little? So let's look at one final hand. This is the last one. Thank God, a lot of you were saying I can hear you. So it's a pretty obvious spot for me, so I'm guessing that I was more interested in what the opponent did. And this is a pretty easy spot for a very loose call for him. This is Manipitude, whatever his name is. And he's a very solid winning player. He makes a lot of good decisions. He'll make the loose call if required. And he makes the loose call, which is good for him, not for me necessarily. And what could he be calling with here? Well, first off, he's getting 2-to-1 pre-flop from a chip perspective, so certainly be calling almost any 2. depending on my range, but given the range that I have and that he knows that I will have, he can certainly call with almost any two. Now, from an ICM perspective, he needs to be getting a little bit better. It needs to be a little bit better than 33%. So maybe 38%, 40% favorite, somewhere between there. Which again, against my wide range, there are a lot of hands that qualify, a lot of trashy looking hands. So I'm thinking he can probably call like, I don't know, like 55, 60, maybe more percent of the time. So this is, and what did he end up having? I'm calling Jack 6. That's a really solid call against my range. Might seem, oh my god, call all in for most of your stack with Jack 6 suited on the button, but again, risk reward, and the math doesn't necessarily know that it's the bubble. All that it knows is that there's a certain risk and there's a certain reward, and and if it's positive, you take it. Doesn't know that it's the bubble necessarily. So is this a good call against my range? Well, I have to believe that it is. Again, let me set it up in Wizard. So the default ranges have me shoving 42%, but I think it's pretty clear I'm shoving more widely than this. I mean, I just happen to have Ace-King suited, but I would probably be shoving something like this. Well, I mean, maybe more. Something like that, maybe? Were there antes in this, by the way? I don't remember. Yeah, there were antes, and I don't... Oh, yeah, I got to set it up. 200, 400. There we go. So, there, if I'm shoving 73%, he can call me just about as widely as I'm shoving. And actually, that's an interesting case. A lot of times when you're getting 2 to 1 on a call, a lot of times you can call at least as widely in a lot of situations as the guy is shoving. Just about. For example, I'm shoving 68%. He can call 68%. I'm shoving... Now, it doesn't really get to be any 2. Then it kind of breaks down. I'm guessing if I'm shoving any 2, he can call about maybe 86 to 90%. 89%. So, yeah, that's kind of a guideline, too. Whatever a guy's shoving, you can call... If you're getting 2 to 1, on the bubble like that, this kind of setup, you can call just about as widely as the guy's shoving. And a lot of times, and when it gets to be lower, a lot of times even wider, because the pot odds then make up for it a little bit. But if you follow that guideline, 2 to 1 on the bubble, call as widely as the guy is shoving, it's not going to get you to, it's not going to take you, and especially if, you're still in the tournament. But anyway, good call by him, certainly against my range, which has got to be something like that, at least. I don't know, maybe I'd fold out some of the junkier hands, but I can't imagine that I would. But solidly within the wheelhouse. So, if you're shying away from calls like that, and you're against a wide shover, you're probably missing out on money. Well, anyway, that is my January hand history review. I think there's some interesting spots in Part 2. Some of them sort of were reminiscent of spots in Part 1, but I think it's good to see the same concept maybe instantiated in different hands, because some of the things change, and there's always different aspects. And so, I don't know. I like this format of video, and I'm certainly open to making this kind of thing every month, at the end of the month. Come out with basically my month in review and come out with some of the hands, and you can just kind of look over my shoulder as I review my own play. So if you like that format and you want me to continue doing these, I'd be more than happy to. Just let me know in the comments. So anyway, that's it, and I will see you another time. Good luck.